But let's talk about Elizabeth Warren talking about the Electoral College. Because that tendency of Democrats that Beto had in endorsing the Republican candidate overheard over the Democrat who ends up going and losing by 1,000 votes. And then having that same Republican say, yeah, no, it's not reciprocal.
He was buddies with him, right?
Well, apparently.
They are buddies.
Apparently, it's
the guy didn't say their buddyship was canceled. He just said he's not voting for
My love for him is unconditional.
Right, but Beto could have had the same, he's a great guy. He's one of my favorite members of Congress. Gina Ortiz, I look forward to working with her, and I endorse her because we're both Democrats.
Exactly.
But we'll have a beer, win or lose.
I'll invite my buddy up to D.C., and he can check out my office now that he's gone, once Gina Ortiz is in.
Take him out for a beer after he loses.
This dynamic of the Democrats pushing some type of I'm looking for the good Republicans. That I'm going to meet the Republicans halfway. This strategy has been a unequivocal failure over the past couple of decades. This idea that Democrats are going to show up at the knife fight with a spoon and, what I'm going to try and do first, I'm going to feed them some soup during this knife fight. No, it doesn't work. And this is what I like about Elizabeth Warren talking about the Electoral College. Let's play this clip.
The next question comes from Rukia Lumumba. She's a legal advocate and community organizer here in Jackson. She also happens to be the sister and former campaign manager of Jackson's current mayor, Chokwe Antar Lumumba. Her late father, Chokwe Lumumba, was also once the mayor of this city as well.
Pause for 1 second. Side note. We interviewed Chokwe Lumumba at Netroots Nation. He is considered self-proclaimed desire to be the most radical mayor in the country. Really interesting guy. Go back and look for that. I think that was in August, or the first week of August of 2018. But go ahead.
Once the mayor of this city as well. Rukia.
All right.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Jackson, Mississippi. Yeah. So voter disenfranchisement is real. Mm-hmm. In Mississippi, there are 23 felonies that once convicted ban a person from voting for the rest of their lives, literally limiting their citizenship and right to democracy. Mm-hmm. Moreover, residents' access to voting is limited by archaic voter registration processes and limited voting formats. How will you expand voting rights to the formerly incarcerated, ensure online voter registration, and non-excuse early voting?
All right. Great question. But can I go you one bigger? Yeah. And that is, I believe we need a constitutional amendment that protects the right to vote for every American citizen and to make sure that vote gets counted. We need to put some federal muscle behind that. And we need to repeal every one of the voter suppression laws that is out there right now. And I'll tell you one more. We need to make sure that every vote counts. And I want to push that right here in Mississippi, because I think this is an important point. You know, come a general election, presidential candidates don't come to places like Mississippi.
That's true.
Yeah. They also don't come to places like California and Massachusetts, right? Because we're not the battleground states. Well, my view is that every vote matters. And the way we can make that happen is that we can have national voting, and that means get rid of the Electoral College and every vote.
Okay, so the means in which to get rid of the Electoral College would either be a constitutional amendment There is also what is known, and we've talked about on this program, the National Popular Vote Compact, which is essentially an agreement amongst states that they will alter their constitutions in such a way that they will agree to award their electors to the winner of the popular vote. And you need, obviously, enough states that equal 270 electors. Right now, Colorado was the most recent to vote this in and sign it into law at the very least. I don't know if they amended their constitution or not, but that brings the total to somewhere, I think, around 200. There's a couple of states that are looking to do this before the 2020 election, but we're not going to get to 270 anytime soon. I don't know that we'll ever get to 270 because I don't know that a Republican-dominated state is going to sign on to this for obvious reasons. So we're not going to get a constitutional amendment. We're not going to get this national popular vote compact is not going to go through anytime soon. What is the value of Elizabeth Warren in the context of a presidential election in 2020? Really a Democratic primary, but a presidential election in 2020. What is the value of her saying this? In addition to the fact that obviously these type of reforms take years and years, and these are long-term movements, the value of it is also signifying to both the Republican and the Democratic Party, to the American public, that there is something amiss here. That we're no longer going to just worship at the altar of norms that are problematic. The Electoral College, highly undemocratic, right? It's not one person, one vote. It just doesn't work out that way. If it was, we would have President Clinton right now. If it was, we would have President Gore. There may have been no Iraq war. Who knows what the trajectory of history? There may have not been a 9/11. Who knows what the trajectory of the United States would have been if we had actually followed the will of the people as expressed by the votes. Now, that's not to say that it's rigged or that it was a technical victory, although I think in the case of at least George Bush, I could tell you it was vote theft, and that was a function of the Supreme Court, as far as I'm concerned. But this is a problem. It's anti-democratic, and every person in the country, whether it is the law of the land or not, should be aware that it's anti-democratic. We should be aware that the Senate is fundamentally anti-democratic, that the number of people who control the policies of our government, of the lawmaking of our government, is less than the people who are at the whim of those people. In other words, there are millions of people more who voted for Democratic senators than there are who voted for Republican senators. Yet Republicans have control of the Senate because of the way that senators are voted. Each state gets two, regardless of population. That's the way it's been set up. Whether we like it or not, that is the Constitution. We could change it, but we're not going to get to the point where we can change it. But we should know that it's fundamentally anti-democratic because that's going to implicate other politics. And Democratic politicians are no longer afraid of raising these issues. And it is because they have, rightly so, sort of, are able to begin to see the reality of the situation, which is many of these anti-democratic features are not just a function of legacies, but are also enhanced and abused by the Republican Party. Right? I mean, you have Democrats talking about reinstituting the filibuster. In other words, we will get back into power if we take over the Senate, and because we know the Senate is an anti-democratic institution, at least in the context of the Republicans, when the Republicans control it, just structurally, it's almost impossible for it to be anti-democratic when Democrats control it because they will get more votes. We will never have, at least in our lifetimes, an era where Democrats will control the Senate, where the majority of Americans have not voted for Democrats to be the Senate, to control the Senate. And despite that, Democrats, you still have Democrats. Democratic senators are saying, we're going to give them, even though that's the most democratic outcome the Senate can exist, we're going to give the minority the ability to filibuster, to stop us. Whereas Republicans, who sit in control of the Senate with far less people voting for them, they strip the filibuster.
In the naive and absolutely horrifying words of Richard Blumenthal, and this was about a year and a half ago, so maybe he's wisened up, 2 wrongs don't make a right.
Right. And Beto O'Rourke, on one hand, when he endorses the Republican or he refuses to endorse the Democrat running against his Republican buddy because he wants to maintain some sense of collegiality, when he gets up there and he says, I want to bring people together, which incidentally is what Glenn Beck says. It's what Glenn Beck says when he was apologizing for supporting Trump, and it's what Glenn Beck said the other night on Hannity when he said, I'm supporting Trump now. I'm against Trump. We need to bring people together. I'm for Trump. We need to bring people together.
Just different groups of people bringing
together. In other words,
credulous liberals or a white nationalist
together in the context of politics is meaningless claptrap. When Elizabeth Warren comes out and calls for the abolition of the Electoral College, at the very least, even though we're not going to see that policy change for a long time, if ever, she's putting down a marker and saying, I know, and you should know, there's a fundamentally undemocratic dynamic that is at work here. And it is highly problematic to providing people with the material benefits that they want out of their government. And when that is stymied, when the government is not working, despite the fact that the people have expressed their will as to how they want it to work, and particularly when you do not have the arc of justice in your favor, you start to get stuff like Donald Trump. And so that's why I love the fact that Elizabeth Warren is making a campaign issue of something that will never happen with her as president.
But then her friends across the aisle might not want to have a beer with her later, and that might make her sad.
It may make her sad. I don't think so. I don't think she cares that much about the beer.
It's not just about the beer. It's also about friendship. And friendship is great. And democracy is great. And I just believe if we can have friendship plus democracy equals MC square. And lots of moving around.
Everything he says with a note.
And then if you
guys
am
strumming a guitar.
Matt, if we could bed a West Wing soundtrack under this, that would really be great.
All right, we got to take a break. I wanted to get to more.